The first sound is silence, not the silence of peace, but of suspension, like the moment before the rope breaks or the heart does. It is here, in this suspended stillness, that the soul begins to hear. Beneath the noise of daily motion, beneath the mechanical cheerfulness demanded by the age, there lies something older, something truer, a sigh buried so deeply in the human breast, it no longer knows its own name. You were told that life had a direction, that there was a purpose waiting for you like a hidden gem buried beneath effort, willpower, and affirmation. But that was the first cruelty, not because it was a lie in the crude sense, but because it dressed despair in velvet and called it meaning. The will is a flame that burns not because it is noble, but because it cannot stop. To exist is to want, and to want is to suffer an unending gnawing in the marrow of all things that breathe. Look closely at a child, not with sentiment, but with clear sight. That first cry is not a celebration, it is a protest. They emerge into this world as into a sentence, not of guilt, but of hunger. Hunger for warmth, for air, for milk, for touch. The seed of suffering lies not in failure, but in the very fact of being. Nature did not ask you whether you wished to be born, it tore you from oblivion into striving and wrapped you in a flesh that decays from the moment it begins. The animal does not seek purpose. The deer runs, the bird flies, the worm burrows. Their misery is direct, immediate, and free of illusion. But man is cursed with reflection. He watches his own hunger. He contemplates his own death. He dreams of permanence in a world where even the mountains weep themselves into sand. And so he invents stories of gods, of destinies, of noble callings. He builds temples, not to truth, but to numbness. He does not want to know what is. He wants to feel that what is has a reason. But what if there is no reason? What if the aching within you is not a riddle to be solved, but the very structure of reality laid bare? Look around. The world is not a novel with a moral. It is a theater of longing, where each being claws forward only to be swallowed by time. Love ends, health fades, dreams rot. Even memory, the fragile thread you clutch in the dark, unravels. Purpose in this landscape is not a lantern, it is a mirage. The modern world shouts to you from every glowing screen. Become, rise, conquer, find your bliss. But all this noise is just the will dressing up its desperation in glitter. No one tells you that joy is not something you can keep, that success, once reached, is hollow, a castle made of air. You strive for status, for beauty, for knowledge, not because they complete you, but because they distract you from the void. And the moment they stop distracting, they begin decaying. Every pleasure carries its own poison. The feast leads to nausea, the embrace turns cold, the victory sours. Even the most exquisite moments, when examined without intoxication, carry the whisper of their own death. You laugh, and already the laugh belongs to memory. You touch, and already the skin remembers what is gone. All things beautiful are not signs of hope, but reminders of transience. Do you see? The pain is not the exception, it is the rule. The so-called meaning you chase is the dream of a creature who cannot face the mirror. Purpose is not found, it is manufactured to anesthetize, to keep you running, to keep you buying, to keep you chained to the wheel of want. But the wheel turns and never delivers, and each turn grinds down the soul a little more. You may think this is despair, but it is clarity, for in stripping away the lie, you begin to see with the eye of truth. You begin to understand that freedom is not the fulfillment of desire, but the release from it. That peace is not the arrival at some final goal, but the letting go of the illusion that such a goal exists. When you stop running, when you sit in the bare stillness of what is, you touch the edge of the real. You may feel now the weight of this understanding. Let it sit with you. Do not turn away. There is no escape in distraction that does not return to this point. All paths lead here to the silent confrontation with suffering. Not the dramatic suffering of tragedy, but the quiet ache of continuity. The mourning that returns without promise. The task that repeats. The longing that revives even when you think it dead. And yet, in this bleak terrain, a strange light begins to emerge. Not a light of hope, but of lucidity. You are not alone in your sorrow. Every face you pass, every voice you hear, carries the same burden. Behind every mask is a soul trying not to drown. The entire theater of life is filled with trembling hands gripping the illusion of purpose like a talisman. Once you see this, compassion dawns not as virtue, but as recognition. There is dignity in the one who suffers without delusion. There is beauty in the one who walks without pretending. The one who has no illusions left is not empty, they are unburdened. Like a tree stripped of its leaves in winter, they are bare, but real. They do not speak of destiny. They do not preach the gospel of productivity. They look into the void and find not terror, but rest, not reward, but release. This is the first threshold, the surrender of the lie, the admission that what you were promised, purpose, fulfillment, salvation, was always a shadow on the cave wall. And that the truth, though bitter, is not without quiet grace. The grace of seeing clearly, of not needing more, of no longer being fooled. Let the silence return. Let it fill you, not with fear, but with stillness. This is not the end, not yet. There are deeper wounds to touch, more illusions to peel away. But for now, this breath is enough. To be here, without the lie, is the beginning of truth. You begin to see that every joy you have ever tasted was laced with the terror of its loss. The tender hand you held one day, it loosened. The laughter you cherished, it echoed once, and then never again. No moment stands still. No sensation lingers unspoiled. Even the most sacred touch dissolves into memory, and memory into mist. What you love most dearly is already dying in your arms. This is not tragedy, it is structure. The will craves repetition. It demands to feel again what once pleased it. But the world denies this plea, not out of cruelty, but because it cannot obey. No river flows backwards. No heartbeat echoes twice with the same rhythm. You return to the place where you once felt alive, and you find only the shell of that moment, the scaffolding without the spirit. Nostalgia is not longing for the past, but grief for what the present cannot restore. And yet the will persists. It dresses up the old hunger in new costumes, new ambitions, new lovers, new beliefs. It says, this time it will last, this time it will be enough. But behind each new mask waits the same old ache, the wound of being that no balm can seal. We are not punished because we want. We suffer because wanting is our very nature. We are the beast that hungers even in the midst of abundance. Even the noble passions, the thirst for justice, the ache for truth, the longing to be seen, carry within them the same root, the will seeking permanence where there is none. The philosopher and the lover both chase shadows, each thinking their object will still the restlessness. But stillness does not live in the object. It cannot be captured. It is the absence of chase the moment the will falls silent, not satisfied. But such silence rarely comes. The machinery of the world is designed to restart the craving at every turn. Society does not want you free, it wants you occupied. It whispers through its screens and slogans, keep moving, keep earning, keep proving. It offers you images of lives you do not live, so that your own may feel insufficient. It sells you the fantasy of arrival, all while keeping you circling the same worn path. Even love becomes a transaction, intimacy, a performance. You are told to brand yourself, to curate your soul, to become desirable in an endless market of eyes. But beneath the surface, each smile is a plea. Do not leave me alone with my own emptiness. We do not connect, we cling, not out of wickedness, but out of the unbearable solitude that hovers at the edge of every conscious moment. The fear of loneliness is not the fear of being alone, it is the fear of seeing clearly, of being stripped of the roles, the noise, the affirmations. It is in solitude that the mirror sharpens. There you see the futility, not of others, but of yourself. And few can bear such nakedness. They rush back to the crowd, to the theater of becoming, because it offers the sweet fiction of relevance. But relevance to what? To whom? Time devours every achievement. The names you worship today will one day be dust. Your beauty will fade. Your triumphs will dull. Your words will vanish into languages that no longer exist. The world forgets. It has to. Its tide moves on. And so to attach yourself to legacy is to tie your soul to the wind, something always moving, never yours. The wise do not seek to be remembered. They seek to be free. And freedom begins not with accumulation, but with renunciation. Not as sacrifice, but as awakening. You do not need what you chase. You chase because you do not know that you are already beyond it. The self. The precious self you guard and promote is a bundle of cravings wrapped in memory. Dissolve it, and you dissolve the fever. There is no final answer that makes the pain disappear. No revelation that renders suffering obsolete. There is only the deepening of awareness, the gentle unfolding of perception, until you see that the pain was never personal. It is the signature of existence itself. To live is to hurt. To know this without flinching is the beginning of detachment, not as withdrawal, but as clarity. In detachment, there is no numbness, only silence. A silence that does not resist, but receives. You no longer grasp, but observe. You no longer demand, but endure. This endurance is not resignation in the common sense. It is a kind of peace that arises when you realize that nothing is owed to you, and therefore nothing can be taken. Even death loses its sting in this light. It is not an end, but a relief. Not a terror, but a homecoming. The will resists it, for the will knows that death is the one door it cannot pry open. But the soul, the quiet, watching soul, does not fear vanishing. It has already tasted the freedom of non-attachment. To die is to drop the weight you never needed to carry. But we return to life, again and again, pulled by habit, by desire, by the illusion of something left undone. And so the wheel turns. Rebirth, not as mysticism, but as metaphor, the same patterns, the same pain, wearing different masks. The roles change. The costumes shift, but the play remains, the will chasing its own tail, believing the next bite will finally nourish. There is no escape through effort, no escape through belief. There is only the slow, patient erosion of illusion. Each truth, once seen, strips away a layer, and beneath each layer, a deeper silence waits. This is the path not toward meaning, but toward stillness. Not toward purpose, but toward the end of the chase. And yet, though the chase is futile, the witnessing of it is sacred. There is a kind of majesty in watching the wheel spin from the center, knowing you are no longer tangled in its spokes. Life moves around you, but you remain untouched, not in body, but in will. You see the game, and in seeing, you are no longer a piece upon its board. This seeing is not dramatic. It is quiet, like dusk. It does not demand recognition. It does not proclaim freedom. It simply no longer grasps. And in that non-grasping, a space opens, not filled with meaning, but with calm. A calm that does not promise anything. A calm that's simply island. Then let the stillness deepen. The calm is not the end, but the threshold of a subtler descent. When one no longer clings to the world, one begins to perceive its fabric not through ideas, but through a kind of inner disillusionment that tastes like dust upon the tongue. The lights dim, the noise recedes. What remains is not emptiness in the negative sense, but the unadorned truth. Nothing can truly satisfy the will, because the will itself is the wound. You may recall moments when the hunger subsided briefly, not because it was fed, but because it was forgotten. Not in ecstasy, but in moments, so still they slipped past awareness. A bird alone on a branch, the shadow of clouds moving across a wall, the way a candle flickers without purpose. These are not lessons. They are reminders that peace is not found in more, but in less, in the retreat from becoming into being. But being is not what the world rewards. The world elevates the performer, the accumulator, the one who speaks louder than the silence that terrifies him. You are told to build, to brand, to declare your uniqueness. But beneath this celebration of identity is a profound fear of vanishing. The ego does not want to be seen, it wants to be preserved. It clutches at time, at legacy, at recognition, because it knows it is fragile, constructed, dissolving. You are praised for ambition. But ambition is not strength. It is the fear of stillness, wearing a mask of energy. It is the child within you screaming for meaning, hoping the next achievement will quiet the thunder inside. Yet no summit stills the storm. You stand there, breathless, triumphant, and already the shadow of the next ascent lengthens before you. There is no pinnacle, only a procession of illusions dressed as peaks. You were told that pain could be transcended through effort, that suffering was a challenge to be overcome. But suffering is not a puzzle, it is the baseline, the background hum of a world that runs on friction. The flower blooms and withers, the sun warms and burns. Every gain is paired with its loss, every bond with its eventual severing. You do not suffer because something is wrong, you suffer because this is the texture of reality. And when you begin to accept this, not as a theory, but as a lived awareness, something within you loosens, not joy, but release, not optimism, but rest. You no longer ask the world to be what it cannot. You no longer beg love to heal what only detachment can soothe. You see others still struggling in the net of desire, and you do not mock them, nor do you preach. You simply watch, with the quiet sorrow of someone who has already wept. This is not the stoicism of the proud, but the weariness of the awakened. The soul that no longer resists the rain, but lets it fall. The eyes that no longer seek beauty, but see it in everything, because they no longer demand that it remain. You sit by the fire, not because it is warm, but because it flickers, and that flickering, impermanent as it is, mirrors the movement of your own mind. The mind, too, must be watched, not silenced by force, nor fed with more philosophy, but observed, like a river swollen with rain. Its thoughts are not truths, but echoes of past cravings. The mind recycles the voices of the world. You must matter, you must make a mark, you must be loved. These whispers are not insight. They are the wind howling through the ruins of your will. To let go of thought is not to become dull. It is to become still enough to see what thought cannot reach. Beneath all ideas is an awareness, untouched by them, a space where no identity can cling. Here, the self fades, not in crisis, but in calm. And when the self fades, suffering remains, but its sting is softened. It is no longer a wound to be cured, but a sea to be floated upon. You do not transcend suffering. You become transparent to it. You feel it pass through you, like light through stained glass. The pain remains, but it no longer owns you. You grieve, but the grief is clean. You ache, but the ache is open. No resistance, no drama, just a quiet knowledge that this, too, is part of the turning of time, of flesh, of the wheel of birth and death. There is no reward for this awareness. No medal, no praise. You will not be celebrated for your clarity. In fact, you will often walk alone. The crowd does not want your silence. It wants your participation. It wants you to cheer, to buy, to believe. But the one who has seen through the veil cannot return to the masquerade. Not because he is bitter, but because the mask has dissolved. And so you walk. Not forward, not toward anything. You simply walk. The world moves, and you move with it, without needing to control. You rise each day not with purpose, but with present. You work, not for outcome, but for rhythm. You speak, not to be heard, but to echo what is real. You love, not to possess, but to witness. This is the strange piece of detachment, that nothing belongs to you, and so you lose nothing. That nothing completes you, and so you lack nothing. The self that once needed to be filled now watches the world with empty hands, and those hands, because they grasp nothing, receive everything. Every moment, unfiltered by demand, becomes a quiet revelation. You begin to see the sacred in the mundane, the sound of water dripping in an old basin, the way shadows fold themselves across a room, the faint crease in the face of someone who does not speak. These are not symbols, they are not messages. They are simply what island, and because you no longer seek meaning, they become luminous, not with significance, but with stillness. There is no higher truth waiting at the end, no final insight that will dissolve all sorrow. There is only this, the breath, the moment, the awareness that does not chase. And this, once seen, becomes enough. Not satisfying in the way desire dreams of, but sufficient in the way a quiet rain is sufficient to the earth. The world does not need to change for you to be free. You need only cease to demand that it do so. This is not a giving up, it is a waking up. You release the world from the burden of fulfilling you. And in that release, you find the first taste of what cannot be taken. The freedom from needing anything at all. Then the silence deepens into something more than quiet. It becomes a presence, not of something, but of what remains when all things fall away. The world continues to hum its tired hymn of striving, but you now stand apart from its chorus, not because you are above it, but because you have ceased to sing. The music no longer moves you. The rhythm no longer demands your step. Here, the ego begins to loosen its grip entirely. It does not die with drama. It withers like a leaf that has lost its season. The self that once narrated your every thought now speaks less, interrupts less, fades, and with it, the anxiety that came from protecting, projecting, perfecting. There is nothing left to protect. What could they take from you? You own nothing, not even yourself. You become like the sky open, watching, impersonal. Thoughts pass like clouds, emotions like storms, but you are no longer within them. You are not the weather, you are the stillness behind it. You do not resist the rain, nor cling to the Sunday. You watch, and in the watching, find a peace that has no opposite. A peace not made of comfort, but of emptiness. The world, once so loud, grows thin around the edges. Its colors remain, its forms persist, but its pull fades. It no longer promises, it no longer seduces. It's simply island, and that isness, raw, unsweetened, becomes enough. You no longer ask, why? Because you see that no answer would still the hunger. The question itself was born of the will. Without the will, there is only presence, and presence does not inquire, it abides. Time stretches differently here, not slower, but softer. You do not count days, you do not chase moments. You live like a shadow cast across stone, real, but without urgency. Memory loses its sting. The past becomes a soft echo. The future, a mirage you no longer follow. Only the now remains, vast and bare, like a plain without horizon. In this plain, suffering still walks beside you, but it no longer feels like a trespasser. It is a companion now, old, familiar, no longer feared. You do not try to remove it, nor do you ask it to explain itself. You let it speak in its language, the ache in the chest, the heaviness behind the eyes. And it speaks not of punishment, but of truth, that to be conscious is to be cut open, yet this cut is not a flaw. It is the aperture through which the real enters. Without it, you would be sealed in illusion, safe and blind. But through this wound, you see, and what you see is not horror, but intimacy, the closeness of all things, the trembling unity of a world that suffers together, silently, beneath the masks of pride. You no longer speak much of purpose. The very word tastes artificial now. Purpose implies a path, a destination, but you have seen the path vanish under your feet too many times. You have arrived nowhere too often to keep believing in arrival. There is no there, only here, and the here is without shape, without climax. It is not what you wanted, but it is what remains when one dies. And strangely, in this death, a tenderness appears, not as sentiment, but as seeing. You look at others, their restless eyes, their weary smiles, and you feel no judgment, only recognition. You were once there, you too believed, you too reached, you too feared that to stop wanting was to stop living. But now you know, wanting is not life, it is the dream that keeps you from waking. And so you begin to live differently, not better, not wisely, just differently. You do not strive to matter, you do not argue to win, you do not love to possess. You move like water yielding, formless, without ambition, not out of weakness, but because you have seen the cost of resistance. You flow not to get somewhere, but because flow is what remains when the will falls silent. Even beauty changes. You no longer chase it, but you see it everywhere, in the lines on a stranger's face, in the way light fades through dirty glass, in the sound of wind pulling through dead leaves. Nothing needs to be perfect now. Everything simply is broken, temporary, and therefore unbearably real. Pain still comes, loneliness still visits, but they no longer threaten. You do not need to escape them. You make space for them beside you, like old ghosts who have stories worth hearing. You do not try to heal them. Healing implies something was wrong, but nothing is wrong. This is just what it means to exist, to bear the weight of being without collapse. This is not a message the world wants. The world trades in promises, and this is the end of promise. The world trades in progress, and this is the end of movement. You will not be applauded for arriving here. But in this quiet, in this unmoving place, you will find something more honest than praise, a serenity that does not shimmer, a freedom that does not announce itself. You no longer dream of changing the world. You no longer think salvation lies in systems or revolutions. You see that the sickness is deeper. It is the sickness of becoming, of needing things to be other than they are. And once you stop needing, the sickness cannot touch you. The world remains as it is broken, magnificent, indifferent, and you remain as you are, a witness and nothing more, and nothing less. Then at last, the self begins to fade, not in violence, not in sorrow, but like the final ember, giving its last flicker to the dark. You do not mourn it, you do not resist. It has served its long function, carrying the weight of illusion through years of suffering. Now, it may fall silent, like a candle finally permitted to die without ceremony. There is no great moment, no explosion of insight, no celestial reward. Only a vast, inward quiet, the kind that falls across a field long after the wind has left it. The thoughts are still there, faint as birds circling far above, but they no longer land, they no longer nest. You watch them pass, each one a form without meaning, a movement without direction. The body remains, it breathes, it aches, it moves through the days with the slow rhythm of tides. But you are no longer within it in the old way. You do not identify with its hungers. You do not obey its cries. It is a garment worn lightly, not clung to. When pain comes, you feel it, but do not flinch. When pleasure comes, you feel it, but do not pursue. There is no longer anything to hold, and so nothing can be taken. Others may speak to you, plead with you, even love you, but the you they speak to is already gone. What answers them is not a self, but an echo, a voice shaped by the moment, but no longer rooted in desire. You do not manipulate, you do not seek agreement, you do not perform. You respond only when the world calls, and when it does not, you return to silence. You walk through cities now as though walking through fog. The crowds move quickly, their faces tense with craving. Their eyes dart from one promise to another, always arriving too late. You see their hope, and in it, you see their doom. Hope is the veil that suffering wears when it wants to delay its own recognition. It does not soften the blow, it ensures it. You speak little of what you've seen. Most would not want to hear it. They are still in love with the voice of the will. They still believe the next thing will save them. You cannot save them. You can only see them, and seeing is no longer an act of judgment, but of quiet mourning. Not because they are lost, but because they do not yet know there is no need to be found. And so you become invisible, not outwardly, but inwardly. You no longer expect the world to recognize you. You no longer look into mirrors for reassurance. The name you once guarded with pride now feels foreign. The story you once told about your life now seems distant, like a dream recalled upon waking, already fading from memory. There are no more enemies, because there is no more center to defend. There are no more goals, because there is no more future to imagine. What remains is the eternal present, not as a mystical escape, but as the only terrain that never lied. Everything else was mirage. This, only this, breath by breath, is what was real. And even this begins to dissolve. The present, too, was a concept, a boundary between past and future, both of which now feel like theater. You no longer track time. You no longer measure value. Each moment is equal in its emptiness. Each gesture floats in a void, so vast it cannot be grasped. And in this void, the last illusion falls. You were never here, not in the way you believed, not as an I that acts, that changes, that achieves. You were a flicker in consciousness, a movement of the will, a shape made of need. And now, the need is gone, and the shape collapses. Not in tragedy, not in bliss, but like a wave, folding back into the sea, losing nothing, gaining nothing, simply ceasing to be separate. Death no longer waits. It walks beside you, step for step, not as a threat, but as kin. You feel it in every exhale, in every slow blink, in every fading scent. You do not resist. You do not invite. You simply bow to it. As one phantom nods to another, the body will fall, the voice will fall, all names will fade, But this is not the end, for what ends was never truly held, and now the silence becomes complete. Not the silence of emptiness, but of absence. The absence of striving, the absence of self, the absence of illusion. What remains cannot be spoken. It cannot be understood. It cannot be lived in the way life is commonly lived. It is a stillness beyond presence, the stillness of the thing, before all things and after them. You sit, perhaps by a window, the light touches your face. You do not name it sunlight. You do not register the warmth. You are not apart from it. There is no boundary, no awareness, even of awareness. Only this unspeakable unbeing, this breathless vanishing into the thing that never began. And there, without a final word, without a final thought, the will falls quiet. And what you are is no longer someone who seeks. It is no longer someone at all.